Your ability to detect high-level threats is critical to your chess improvement. Not seeing threats is a primary reason players lose. You simply didn't see the punch coming, or you were too late to stop it. I've already given you the building blocks of key chess threats in 4 video lessons on the 16 forcing controlling moves, on the 14 strategic goals, the 13 chess tactics, and how to find chess tactics with power moves. Go look at those first, and I'll put the links in the description below. In this new threat detection series, you will get invaluable practice at detecting and discovering the threats of the world's greatest players. These threats are usually prepared within 1, 2, and 3 moves, and at best are double threats, which are very difficult to detect. You will be asked to pause the video to detect the threats. Fischer has the black pieces in this game, and white opens with e4, c5, knight to f3, knight to c6, d4, pawn takes, knight takes, knight to f6, knight to c3, defending the pawn, right? There was a threat, right? Hacking the e4 pawn, knight to c3, developing, defending. d6, bishop to e2. There were other moves, guys, right? There's all sorts of playable moves in these openings. We're going to look at the key threats, though, right? Okay, little guy harassing big guy, power move number 5, obvious threat. Knight has to run or capture. He could have captured. Knight to b3, bishop to e7, castle, castle. And now white starts to expand, right? You're supposed to get into enemy territory, penetrate enemy territory, infiltrate enemy territory. And he's trying to break up that central pawn there at e5. Okay, all right, what's the threat? So Fischer played a5. This is an obvious one, right? It's power move number 5, a little guy harassing big guy. That pawn can advance one more square and attack this knight, make him run, make him dance. Remember, your key goal is to control your opponent. That way, you keep him on the defensive while you can go on the offensive. Simple as that. So white stops that. Bishop develops to e6, which also attacks the knight, right? Your pieces are doing something. He's attacking this knight here. And now white decides to play f5, attacking the bishop. He's tempting him to give up the bishop pair. Yeah, one of the key middle game elements is to try to get the bishop pair, but that it's not always, nothing's black and white in chess. Fischer takes the knight, gives him his bishop, and pawn takes. So what's the compensation? Now white has doubled pawns, yeah, here on b3. And the other thing, I always look at, you got to look at, this is a way to start understanding pawns. If a pawn cannot move, like this pawn can't move without being captured. So you look at pawns and see their ability to move forward and what weaknesses that may create, because it also gives up the defense of this square. And that, so when you control a pawn, this is the same idea when you control the center. What does that mean? It's such a vague, abstract thing. And it really means that if your opponent advances his pawns, it's bad for him. It's detrimental for him to do that. So this pawn is pretty much frozen, right? It can't move forward. It becomes a target. Pawn targets, that's the name of the game in chess, yeah? All else being equal unless other things materialize. Okay. And now, all right, that's the other thing. Now we have an outpost. Look how many weaknesses are created as a result. This knight can't be budged right now. A pawn can no longer harass it. And of course he's hitting the central square for possibilities that maybe to advance this, to open up this bishop. And now, so here's how you count, right? So there's 1, 2, 3 defenders of this pawn, of this square, and there were 3 defenders for black as well, this knight, and the queen, which means he could have entered this square. 3 against 3, but now this bishop can whack off the knight, so you cannot enter this square safely. All right, so now the rook slides over. You know, this is interesting. Now this frees up the queen, right? The rook is defending the bishop, and it frees up the queen, which was the only defender of the bishop. The other feature to notice, right, whenever, you know, it's all about outplaying your opponent in the end, right? Beyond openings, you know, if you can get people out of their memorization, get them to have to start thinking. This is happening at the highest level. I mean, Magnus Carlsen is the best at doing that, right? At outplaying his opponent. And it's based on these things that we're going to be going over in these series and these games and with the power moves. Ultimately, you're trying to get the initiative. You're trying to control your opponent. So notice that this bishop, and it's based on the simplest ideas. This is what blows me away. This bishop's undefended. That's power move number 3. You know, these things are starting to add up now. We've got an undefended bishop. We've got this pawn that has to be monitored. All right, bishop to f3, now also supporting this d5 square. But look at him, right? He's just a horrible piece. He's just a defender. So black has got the jump on white now. Queen throws in the check, right? There was always the check as well. Power move number 1, always look for the checks. King runs. Rooks belong on open files, right? Open and files that can be opened. And now the rook slides over, probably to try to support this push here. I don't want to give too much away now, but remember, I have this list, you know, it's in the book. And, you know, king mobility, you always got to look at that. And now, look, here's the other thing. You know, Maurice Ashley wrote a book. I can't remember the name of it, but he's always talking about the square left behind. Whenever a piece moves, and the drawback of the previous move, but the square left behind concept, I don't know if that's his or if that's the other guy. Oh, I can't think of his name right now. It'll come to me. But so this square, no, it wasn't Maurice. Maurice was the drawback. What's the other guy? Dang it. Okay, but anyway. So now this square is free for the queen. Look, here's the other thing I didn't point out earlier. So you'll always look at the weaknesses, right? Undefended pieces and undefended pawns, power move number 3. This pawn is undefended, and Fischer goes right in for it. Yeah, he's going to attack this pawn. Infiltrate enemy territory. So the queen goes for the trade. And now, you know, this is just also another thing. Piece networking, piece coordination. That's the other thing that this has done. Now the queen and knight are coordinated. Look, there are only so many variables in chess. Once you know all the variables, which I do point out in my material, there's like, you know, I haven't made the list yet, maybe 10, you know, or 15 or whatever, variables of the battle, of the give and take in the middle game, right? Well, all the time in chess. So now the knight and queen are coordinated on c2. So anyway, the queen goes in and the queen takes. Now look at this. Now it's just a series of power moves. Bishop takes. We have power move number 5, little guy harassing big guy on the rook. Rook runs. Now the knight gets into an even better square on d4, attacking the bishop as well, attacking this pawn. Now we're going after those weaknesses. Yeah? And bishop defends. Okay, now I would like you to consider all the features that we mentioned. Look at the power moves, offensive, defensive power moves, and find a good move for black here. So pause the video. Okay. The bishop's undefended. This is the key feature. And it is being x-rayed by this bishop. The other key feature is that this king has no escape squares. So if we can mount a double attack, which is done by knight to g4, threatening the check and checkmate, threatening the bishop, game over. The rook has to move for the pawn, one of the pawns, so the king doesn't get mated. In the meantime, the bishop is captured. Game over, and white resigns. Yes, it was Josh Waitskin. That was who I was trying to think of about the square left behind. He was the guy featured in Searching for Bobby Fischer. So anyway, I will continue these series on threat detection because I think that is the key to improving your chess rapidly. And if you like this video, if you got something out of it, please give it a thumbs up, make a comment. It really is the only way to stay on YouTube. So thanks so much. Talk to you later.